They say retirement is the beginning of peace. That once you clock out for the last time, you trade deadlines for sunsets and stress for morning coffee on the porch. That's what I thought, too. I thought I was buying serenity when I bought a house in Clearwater Shores, a gated retirement community nestled against the Gulf Coast, where the brochures promised private beaches, friendly neighbors, and the kind of calm you only get after surviving decades of meetings, mortgages, and Monday mornings. They didn't tell me about Diane Foster. Now, Diane wasn't your run-of-the-mill HOA president. She was a force. 5 feet tall in orthopedic sandals, a former dental hygienist with a steel perm and a clipboard fused to her hand, she ran Clearwater Shores with the zealous energy of someone who'd just discovered power late in life and wasn't about to let it go. She didn't enforce the rules so much as weaponize them. And the thing about people like Diane is, when they get a little power, they don't build, they gatekeep. I'm Nate Halvorson, retired aerospace engineer, widower, builder of weird things. The kind of man who reads HOA bylaws like they're troubleshooting manuals and keeps a spreadsheet to track neighborhood violations for sport. I liked order. I liked logic. But above all else, I liked helping people. Which is why, on the day this story takes place, I lost my patience and maybe my mind a little. It started with a breeze. I was sitting on my back patio, IPA in hand, watching the waves rough up the coastline as the wind picked up. It wasn't a storm yet, but it had that smell salty, electric, unsettling. And that's when I saw them. 2 teenage boys about 100 yards out, clinging to a paddleboard, laughing at first, but slowly drifting past the second sandbar. I recognized one as Trevor, the grandson of the Parkers who lived 2 doors down. The other kid was unfamiliar, probably a friend. They were paddling wrong, heads on swivels now, realizing something wasn't right. Rip current. I stood up so fast I nearly spilled my beer. My brain did what it always does: calculations. Drift rate, water speed, wind vector. They had minutes, maybe less. I ran inside and grabbed my binoculars. Focused in. They were trying to paddle back, but the current had them locked in. That's when I heard the sirens. Good. Someone had called 911. The fire department's rescue unit came roaring down the main road, towing a jet ski and an inflatable. But as they turned down the beach access path, they came to a sudden halt. Diane. There she was, standing in front of her pristine white Mercedes SUV, parked perfectly across the path. Arms folded. A human roadblock in pastel caprice. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the firefighters' gestures pointing at the water, frantic. Diane didn't move. She pointed to the truck's tires. To the beach path. She was citing code. Probably something about vehicle weight limits or sand erosion or a clause buried on page 84 of the CC and RS. I could see it all from my deck. The rescue stalled, the boys drifting further. I went inside. To my garage. Now, my garage is not what Diane would call aesthetically harmonious. It's a 3-car workspace stuffed with tools, engines, and half-built projects, including a homemade pizza oven that nearly got me fined last Christmas. But in the center, under a tarp, was my masterpiece, Pegasus. She's a 2-person hovercraft. Built her myself over 2 years with parts from a wrecked snowmobile, a decommissioned HVAC unit, and a riding lawnmower. The frame's aluminum, the skirt is reinforced neoprene, and the propulsion comes from an 800 cubic centimeters 2-stroke that can push her to 40 miles per hour over water, sand, or grass. She's ugly, loud, glorious, and, most importantly, she exists in a legal gray area Diane never anticipated. I had checked. The bylaws mention boats, canoes, kayaks, jet skis, and even inflatable rafts. Not a single word about hovercrafts. A loophole big enough to drive, well, a hovercraft through. I threw on my helmet, hit the primer, pulled the cord, and fired her up. The garage rattled. The walls shook. I throttled up and rolled straight over my lawn, flattening 2 years of St. Augustine grass maintenance. Down the slope, over the sand, onto the beach. People turned. Heads swiveled. The firefighters stepped back. And Diane looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon soaked in vinegar. I gave her a 2-finger salute as I shot past, over the beach, and into the surf. The ride out was brutal. Hovercrafts don't like choppy water. But I kept her steady. Found the boys. They were clinging to the board, pale and exhausted. Hop on, I yelled. They scrambled aboard. One of them, Trevor, looked at me and said, "Is this a boat?" "No," I grinned. "It's justice." We tore back toward the beach. By the time we got there, the Coast Guard had arrived, the crowd had grown, and Diane was yelling at a cop officer Lacey about property damage and unauthorized watercraft. I killed the engine and helped the boys off. Their parents ran to them, crying. Everyone clapped, except Diane. She marched up, finger jabbing at the air. "This is a violation," she screeched. "Multiple violations." I smiled. Which one exactly? The saving lives part, or the using a vehicle not specifically named in the bylaws part? Officer Lacey sighed. "Sir, do you have any documentation on this thing?" "Not required," I replied. Under Florida code, any amphibious vehicle under 16 feet with engines under 10 horsepower doesn't require registration. 10 horsepower? Sure, I lied. She smirked. "You'll probably hear from the HOA." "Oh, I'm counting on it." And boy, did I. 3 days later, a packet 3 inches thick was taped to my door. Fines, warnings, accusations, operation of an unapproved vehicle, damage to community property, excessive noise, unauthorized use of lawn space for transit. I responded to each one, with physics, with statute references, with footnotes. I included diagrams showing my hovercraft's ground pressure was less than that of Diane's Mercedes. I argued that flattened grass blades did not constitute damage, that my hovercraft, while loud, was within the decibel limit for daytime use unless you happened to be particularly sensitive or, say, emotionally invested in controlling everyone around you. That's when she sent the contractors. 2 guys in a beat-up pickup with a clipboard and confused expressions. Said they were hired to dismantle the unpermitted structure. I offered them coffee, gave them a tour, showed them the welds, the wiring, the custom stitching on the skirt. They were impressed. Then I made them a deal. Write her an estimate so big it would make the Pentagon blush. Include environmental fees, special tools, hazardous materials handling, union permits. They nodded, grinned, and drove off. The next week, I became a legend. Neighbors started dropping off food. Little notes tucked into Tupperware. "Thank you." Finally, someone stood up. "Watch your back. She's calling a special meeting." And then came the meeting. Held in the community clubhouse, a beige room in a beige building surrounded by beige minds. Diane presided, flanked by 2 board members who nodded like bobbleheads. The agenda, to determine sanctions against me for conduct detrimental to the community. She gave her speech florid, angry, and weirdly dramatic. Called me a menace. Said I'd endangered lives with my unauthorized airboat. Said my machine represented chaos. Then it was my turn. I pulled out a projector. Slide 1. A photo of Trevor and his friend with their parents, post-rescue. Slide 2. A red-circled excerpt from the HOA bylaws showing the absence of any mention of hovercrafts. Slide 3. A diagram comparing the ground pressure of Pegasus versus Diane's SUV. Slide 4. A satellite image showing the distance from rescue team to victims versus my hovercraft path. I broke a rule, I said. An unwritten one. The one that says order matters more than action. That rules matter more than lives. I broke that rule and I'd do it again. Silence. Then Maria Sanchez stood up. "You find me for wind chimes," she said. "Bamboo once." Another neighbor followed. She made me replant my garden because the flowers weren't uniform. The room erupted. Complaints poured out like floodwaters. Grievances that had simmered for years. Diane's face went pale. Mr. Patel called for a vote of no confidence. It passed. 29-1. The one vote. Diane's own. She stormed out. Purse swinging. Face like thunder. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. All violations rescinded. A handwritten note from the new HOA president, Mr. Patel, asked if I'd be willing to serve as the community's volunteer emergency response coordinator with a stipend. I told him to donate it to the community barbecue fund. Last Saturday, we had our first neighborhood cookout in years. Kids played. Music played. Nobody checked decibel levels. It was nice. And as I sat on my patio, watching the sun dip below the waves, Pegasus parked beside my new decorative patio ramp that just so happens to be launch-ready. I opened my laptop and typed, HOA bylaws Clearwater Shores submersible. No results. Yet,